Hey there, welcome to the Best Ever Conference. I'm sitting here with Neal Bawa. This is Christina Suter with Real Estate Breakthrough, and I was super excited that Neal was willing to sit down with me for a half an hour and have a conversation. So let's start with Neal. You're on a panel, which is the funnest panel of the year. It's the debate. And their topic is how the Fed is going to achieve a soft landing or not. And you're up against John Chang.
Yep.
And I think you get some stiff competition there. So tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that. I mean, really.
Yeah, so I'd like to tell you that I'm actually not on a panel, and because the debate is something that used to be like a panel when 6 or 7 years ago when we used to do it, and Ben Lapidus, who is the moderator of the debate, I sort of started to convince him that the debate should be different from panels. Panels are fair and balanced, and you're listening to other people, and you're listening to what they're saying, and you're not trying to be outrageous, right? You're not trying to win anything on a panel. So I convinced him, and I said, the debate should be about selling tickets, and it should be about humor, right? And so, and this was about in Denver about 6 years ago, and I said, how about we do a debate this year that is no holds barred, winner takes all, completely unbalanced, completely unfair. You simply just tout your own side, and to make it all about debating skill, you give people their side, and you give it to them like a week or 2 weeks in advance.
Okay.
And so it has nothing to do with their beliefs, their thoughts, what they actually think is going to happen. Right? It's just about you're assigned a side. So the debate this year is, did the Fed actually achieve a soft landing, and has a new real estate cycle begun? Now, we can talk about what my actual beliefs are, but at the debate, the only thing I'm going to say is absolutely, the Fed killed it. We are in a new cycle, and here's 50 million different ways that I can prove it to you. Now, I'm up against John Chang, right? So for those of you who don't know John, he's been at Marcus & Millichap now 26 years. He's sort of their lead analyst. He's their face. So there's 1,000 videos on YouTube with John Chang. Right? So he's very well known in the industry. People respect him a great deal. So anything that comes out of his mouth is going to be listened to by people. So I know that, especially because Ben repeatedly will give me the weaker side every single year, right? Because he likes what happens, because if I'm on the weaker side of a debate, regardless of my personal beliefs, I have to win. I come here for a single day. I actually don't come, this is a 3-day conference, I come for a single day, so I'm here today. I only come here because I want to win the debate. This is the most fun and interesting thing I do all year. The debate's an hour long. And I'm only here to beat John Chang and his partner. And so Ben knows what's going to happen. When he hands me the weak side, my technique is not about data, because John Chang has data coming out of his ears.
Yes, he does.
Right?
Right.
My only way for me to win the debate is through humor and through misdirection.
I see.
So anytime they're going to come up with like a truth bomb, I'm going to come up with a humor bomb.
Okay. Well, I'll be watching for that distinctly.
Yeah, this is the whole debate from the very beginning is to throw John off, and he's getting better every year because I've thrown him off multiple times in the past and done it successfully. And the way that they do it is they have a poll at the beginning and a poll at the end. So I promise from 4 to 5 today, all people are going to be doing is laughing. Now, they may get something out of it because the arguments being made, whether I believe them or not, are good arguments. But I think mostly people are there at the debate stage just for pure entertainment. So think back to high school debates, right? When high school debates were not fair, they weren't balanced, they would everyone just talking about their side.
Yes.
We're about to have a high school debate on the BEC main stage.
I recognize the setup when you said it doesn't matter what your opinion is. You've been assigned a side, and that's the side you're going to debate. And the way that you can win in debate is not just knowledge and data, but also through misdirection, being able to sway people's opinions toward your side, whether it's humor or whether it's misdirection in overemphasizing data.
We throw insults at each other. You are going to throw
insults,
like total
insults here, guys.
at each other from 4 to 5. And that's why John is a great team captain on the other side, because he has a thick skin. I have thrown hundreds of insults at him. I've talked about him being drowning in data. I've talked about his age. I've talked about his hair. No. This is a no holds barred thing.
Oh, come on. John Chang's hair, that is unfair. I'm sorry. He's
listen,
perfectly fine head of hair.
Whatever allows me to win, This is an entertainment event.
It is.
People love it. Every year we get more people in the room. Because people are like, yeah, this guy, Neal. And somebody actually, I was on a podcast, and they were like, you realize that after the debates, they call you the raptor.
Oh, really? The
because,
raptor?
Because me and my partner, you know how in Jurassic Park?
Yes.
The raptors, they hunt you, right?
Yes.
They attack in
Yes.
pairs, and they come at you from both sides. So me and my partner on Saturday, we were doing our raptor thing.
Okay, that's
and,
good.
And it's like, okay, we'll do this, and then you'll ambush him like that when he says this.
Because
right?
you know he's going to say it because
exactly.
it's in the data.
I know it's one of his standard arguments.
Exactly.
So it's like, no. Well, first I'll set him up like this, and then he'll blurb this out, and then you attack him this way.
Okay.
The raptor.
The raptor. So even though there is an hour of pure raptorhood here called the debate, the Best Ever Conference is actually a lovely conference. I just want to stand up for a minute. It's an amazing conference.
This is my
favorite.
They
do a great job
by
putting it together. I love coming to this. I've been coming to it ever since Phoebe, I got invited years ago to be part of the extra day, and I love what they stand for, and I love the quality of their presenters, including they even allow you to be on stage and be a raptor.
Every once in a while,
saying.
yes. But bottom line is that in my mind, this is the best conference in the industry, and I have friends that host other conferences, apologies to them. And there are many reasons, like Raise Fest is the best place to go to learn capital raising.
Yes, it is. Hunter Thompson's Raise Fest is amazing.
It's a fantastic conference, but when you're looking for peer advice, and when you're looking for people that are like 1, 2, 3, 10 levels above you, and the way they think up on stage, this is the premier conference in the industry. And I come here, I always have, a couple, sections where I'm just basically standing in awe of the people that are on stage.
Yes, I have to agree. Okay, that being said, you are the mad scientist of real estate, and there's no question about that. I listen to your economic updates regularly, just as I listen to John's. I have to confess, I listen to both of you.
Yeah, I know.
All right, I know.
Listening to the enemy here.
I know, I'm the
Christina,
enemy. I'm not loyal. You expected me to be loyal. I don't blame you. But let's get into some data. All right, so the S&P 500 went up by 25% this last year. The U.S. dollar is still strong, right? Inflation went from 9% down to 2.6%, so the Fed has been capable of curbing inflation. We're having consumer spending is going up, though, by 3.1%, not down and not sideways, and employment is still tight at 4.3%, although it's a little looser than it was before. So are we really going to have a soft landing here, Neal? I mean, I've got some conflicting data here that suggests that we're still pushing forward with more strength than I would expect, given the beating we've received. What's your opinion?
If I was to look at the data today, right, we're early March 2025, there is absolutely no data to suggest that anything other than a soft landing has been achieved.
Okay, and that's not just the debate answer. That is Neal's answer.
That's the Neal Bawa answer,
okay,
right?
that's good. I just want to confirm.
However, the forward-looking indicators point to a very rapidly weakening economy. So, when I'm looking at job numbers, I'm looking at quits data. Quits is when people feel good about the economy, they tend to quit more often. And so when the quits data falls, that means people are unsure that they'll get another job, and that always is a good forward-looking indicator of weakness in the economy 3 months, 6 months.
Thank you. I'm stealing that indicator.
So that's
Neal.
quits data.
Okay, good.
So you can ask ChatGPT what the quits data is like, and you'll notice that it's weakening. So the forward-looking indications are not good. I mean, right now companies are flush with cash. Their overall profit margins are pretty strong. I'm seeing, as you said, the stock market didn't just go up 25% in 2024. It also went up 25% in 2023. And it's very rare for the stock market to have 25% year-over-year growth 2 years in a row.
Yes, right? And it's concerning. Right? It's not, to me, it's
high, right?
Okay, very
to me, the stock market is priced for perfection and beyond with one caveat.
Okay.
So, and that caveat is this. I am extraordinarily interested in what happens with artificial intelligence in the next 24 months.
Yes.
Because so far, all the money that AI has made has been because of hype. People are buying stuff to set up stuff. They're not selling stuff. They're not improving stuff. There's no significant bumps in productivity that I can see anywhere, except maybe a few areas here and there, but no major area has received.
They're implementing, there's no result.
There's no result yet, right? It's too soon to have result. So this massive boost that we have seen in the stock market is simply because no one can afford to not be in AI, so they're spending enormous amounts of money to get in the game. Okay. Now, if in the next... But the stage is really well set up for AI this year and next year to actually do things that improve our lives and improve company productivity and potentially take away jobs as well and create new jobs. So that's the X factor, because in my mind, and I'm on record for saying this, artificial intelligence is the single greatest invention of mankind. If you take the smartphone, cloud computing, the internet, the personal computing, roll them up, multiply by 1,000, you haven't hit AI.
Okay.
Right? That's
Okay.
how
That's a
powerful
lot.
it is.
Yes.
Right? And we're not even at the front edge of it yet, right? Because
Yes.
the applications just started coming out a few weeks ago that I felt were game changers, right? So we've had some early applications that are useful, and that's nice. So to me, I think when I look at the economy weakening, it's definitely weakening. The case for there not being a soft landing, I think, is going to get stronger each month.
Okay.
With AI being the X factor. If it truly does what it's supposed to do, we could have another 20 to 25% S&P 500 year, and obviously that's going to be really good for the economy.
Okay. All right. But do you also feel like AI, as it unrolls, is going to continue it'll increase productivity, but it will affect unemployment, but it's also going to be growing as a field, right? So there's this balance about that whole dance, about it growing as a field and actually increasing. Right? If I remember correctly, your stance on this, right, that it's actually going to be increasing for a while, the actual GDP, but then at some point it is going to be taking jobs.
It will start taking jobs, but probably not in 25, 26. So the early indicators are AI is inflating the total number of jobs in the United States, and that hasn't changed yet. So even in January, right, we're doing this early March, even in January, the top 10 jobs in the United States that were listed were all very heavily influenced by AI. So there's no pullback there that I'm able to see. I think by 27, we start seeing job losses. I think by 2029, we end up in a very dark place. Because in the end, AI is the most unbalanced revolution. Yes, the tech revolution, the internet revolution, the PC revolution, smartphone, they all added jobs, right? I have no doubt that AI will add jobs. But I think it will take more away.
Okay.
So its ability to take jobs away is significantly higher than that of the last three technological revolutions that we've had. Does that impact 2025 in any negative way? Not at all.
No, it increases jobs for now, and it continues to create new jobs, which we need. In my opinion, we need new jobs because we actually still have, because if we don't create new jobs, we won't stay with the need for employment, and we're going to end up having less unemployment again, which means wages will go up again, which will be inflationary.
Yes, exactly. Well, sometimes inflationary, sometimes deflationary. Let me give you an example.
Okay,
right?
Go for it, Neal.
So,
you are the mad scientist.
So let's say Trump succeeds in moving 1 million people who are immigrants, legal or otherwise, and gets them out.
Let's
right?
go there.
They go back to wherever they came from. In that hypothetical scenario, the economy is now 1 million people smaller. So instead of 337 million people living in the United States, you have 336 million. There's absolutely no way in which that is not deflationary because these million people don't earn salaries. They don't pay rents. They don't buy stuff at the Walmart, right? So yes, there's some impact because those 1 million people all had jobs. Immigrants have a very, very high employment rate, right? So those jobs now have to be done by somebody else, and people don't want to do those jobs, so they have to be paid a little bit more, call it 3, 4, 5%. But for that 1 million jobs, sure, there's wage inflation. But there's 164 million jobs in the United States. Wage inflation on 1 million out of 164 million doesn't actually lead to wage inflation for the country. But it is deflationary because 1 million people stop spending money, right?
Spending.
So this concept that Trump is only going to increase inflation and that's going to be bad for real estate because interest rates will stay high is a completely nonsensical idea. 2 of the 3 things that he's doing are deflationary. So obviously the one that's inflationary is tariffs, right? So tariffs will increase inflation and that forces the Fed to keep rates up. The second thing was the one that I just discussed, immigration. But the third thing that he's talking about is that Trump and Elon are looking to cut the size of the federal government by 10%.
Yes, that's a huge...
There are 3.3 million Americans that work for the federal government. If he cuts by 10%, which is entirely doable, by the way. I'm not a fan of indiscriminate cutting, but the federal government is a hideously bloated organization. There's no damage really to the U.S. Consumer if you cut it by 10%. Obviously, by the time you get to 20 and 30, you're cutting to the bone and you're doing real damage.
Right, it's too much.
But the first 10% is a freebie.
You can see that.
That's 330,000 really well-paid people. An average federal employee, if you ask ChatGPT, earns 6 figures, not just in salary, but in pensions and bonuses and all kinds of stuff. So these are people that earn on average over $100,000, and 330,000 of them are going to lose their job in the coming months.
Okay.
They are not buying homes. They are not buying cars. Basically, people that get laid off don't spend money. They'll spend something because they'll get, Social Security. The point is, all of a sudden, 330,000 people that are actually well off, they're upper middle class, will have no jobs. How can that be anything but deflationary?
But deflationary. And unlike immigration, we're not actually losing their need for being able to buy food, being able to continue to hit the mortgage.
Exactly.
So they're going to continue to be part of the consumer spending pool,
they will
even
be.
if it's less.
Right, so they still support the economy, but it's not inflationary because the portion of their salaries that usually goes towards, it's called discretionary income, drops to zero.
Yes.
They'll pay their mortgage because they have Social Security. They'll do whatever they can to pay their mortgage and pay for their car payments. But their discretionary spend, that's what causes inflation in the US. And for 330,000 people, that'll drop to zero.
Okay. So let's change the subject a little bit. I love Trumponomics, and I wish we had an hour to do this, but we don't. Let's ask a little bit about, so multifamily, you presented that in multifamily, we're seeing this growing gap in residential between the mortgage rate and the renters.
That's right.
And it's going to create, in your opinion, a shift in the renters versus ownership. Why don't you talk about that and how Grow Capitalist is going to be prepared for that?
Sure. The United States is a very blessed country. When we compare ourselves to Canada or the Eurozone or Japan, we have an astonishingly high home ownership rate in this country. So depending on how you measure it, somewhere around 63 to 66% home ownership rate, and everybody else basically lives in some kind of rental community, or they live with mom and dad. That number has unquestionably reached its peak. We will never, unless something magical happens in technology, get to the point where we'll be close to that number. It is falling. So imagine two lines. One's a black line, one's a red line, and one line shows the monthly mortgage, and the other one shows the monthly rents. If you look back at the last 80 years, those lines are pretty close to each other. They sort of weave back and forth, some go up, a little down, but they stay in touch with each other, because if you think about it, as people's, rents are in some ways competing with your mortgage, right? So you can either pay a mortgage or you can pay rents, right? So those lines tend to be fairly close together. Right 3 months after COVID, the black line, I think of it as the black line, which is the mortgage line, just decided it didn't want to hang with the rent line anymore. So it went straight up for about 15 months. And so the gap between rents, the average rent and the average mortgage in the United States is shockingly high. It wasn't this high in 2007. It's never been anything like this, right? So since COVID, the average mortgage in the United States is up 110%. The average salary is up 33%. The average rents are only up 22%. So rents are up 22%.
Okay.
The salaries are actually up more than rents, so that's yay, right? 33, 34%. But the average mortgage is up 110%.
Right.
And this is the most upside down that I've ever seen it in my career. And you might say, well, everything upside down corrects. Not really. I mean, a perfect example of that, right, would be home prices should have gone down in the last 2 or 3 years when the average mortgage skyrocketed 110%. They are up 12% in 2.5 years. So everything that goes up doesn't necessarily come down. Sometimes just hangs there for a decade.
It can. And if you look at you're going to know this terminology better than I, but if you look at the low income versus mid income versus high income, you'll see the gap is getting bigger and bigger and continues to get bigger. It doesn't actually course correct. So when people say, can housing really continue to go up over a long period of time? I'm like, well, yes, given that the gap between the lower earners and the top end earners continues to get bigger, so will the gap in housing continue to be that as well.
And there's this belief, and I think it's an irrational belief amongst the richer people in America, that today rental housing, especially single-family rental housing, is still a good buy. I think it's a terrible buy, but nobody listens to me. I'm a nobody. The rich people in America, the people who are now getting richer and richer and richer, right, this line that you just talked about, they believe fundamentally that rental real estate is a great buy. So a significant portion of their money keeps going in there, and that keeps the rental market going upwards when it should be, in fact, going downwards.
Fascinating. So how is Grow Capitalist going to move in 2025?
So we're doing a couple things. So number one is we've always been, buying Class B and Class C buildings. We just don't see the value there at this point in time. The mathematics don't look good. Class C buildings actually have lower occupancy than Class A's, which is unusual. And the reason for that is that as new Class A apartments come into the market, everybody has 2 months concession. Like I have 3 properties renting up right now. They all have 2 months concessions. When you give 2 months concessions on a Class A, your rents are lower than Class B. So you're pulling all the Class B people, and guess what the Bs are doing? They're giving concessions and pulling people from the Cs. So what we've seen at this point is Class C multifamily is not doing well. It is not liquid. You can't really sell your Class C multifamily if you bought it in 2021, 22, 23. I'm a perfect example of somebody that has these properties.
Yeah.
And so we're all holding these properties.
Okay.
And if we're selling them, they're just not a good deal, right? So what is a good deal is Class A, because Class A properties are about 20% cheaper than they were in 2022.
Okay.
And those properties, the math makes sense. So my friends who are here at this conference have made an abrupt pivot, maybe not abrupt, but it's taken them about a year to basically say, you know what, I'm not going to buy Class C. I'm going to buy newer properties. So more and more of my friends who used to buy 70s and 80s product, they're buying 2000 product, 2010 product. I'm in that bucket. I'm going to buy 2010 product.
Okay.
And yes, it has lower cash flow.
Yep.
But today it's still a better deal from a cap rate perspective. Those cap rates are really, at this point, decompressed. And they will compress again at some point in the future. I don't know when. I don't care when. As long as I hold on long enough, I'm going to get that benefit. So there's a cap rate arbitrage in Class A. The cap rate arbitrage in B and C, which was much better before, like the last 6 or 7 years, it was much better, is non-existent. It simply doesn't exist. In fact, it's actually dangerous to be buying Cs because they might continue to decompress, which means the cap rates might go up, which means basically when you're buying a building, it's now worth less than when you paid for it, right? So that's what I'm doing. And then the second piece of it is I'm building 10,000 rental townhomes, and we can talk about that.
Well, the 10,000 rental townhomes are fantastic, but I'm afraid we do need to bring it to a close.
Yeah.
So Neal Bawa at the Best Ever
Not a
Conference.
close, yeah, go ahead.
You guys can go an extra 30 if you want.
Oh my God.
Go an extra 30. Oh,
Go an extra 30.
That's because of lunch.
Lunch.
Oh,
Lunch.
yeah. Let's keep
Okay,
going.
we'll keep going. So, at least for another several minutes. So, I would love to hear about the 10,000 houses because I know you've been putting that out, and that is something that is both real estate based, but it's also based in being able to help housing problems and humanity move forward. And that, of course, is always near and dear to my heart because that's one of my passions. So, tell us about it and what your goal is with that.
You know, I'm fascinated about finding the intersection of profit and purpose, and it's not always easy. When I started multifamily, I thought I was there. I thought that, okay, I'm going to buy some 70s and 80s property, I'm going to improve it, and that's going to be, really good because these properties are not run down anymore and people like living in them. That worked for a while. It really did work for a while. But then, all of a sudden, we went from having 500 syndicators in the US to tens of thousands of them.
Yes.
And we got to the point where we were driving up the prices of those properties so fast that we were being forced to charge more and more and more and more in rents. And so what we ended up doing as an industry, right? Specific examples can be moved aside. But as an industry, over 20 million units in the United States, we actually drove up the prices of multifamily, drove up rents by a crazy number.
Yes, I agree.
And I became disillusioned more and more every year with, why am I participating in this, right? I don't have to participate. I can just retire. I shouldn't be participating in this. And then after, the depression phase, you're like, okay, well, let's do something about it. And so what I realized was I should create stock. So I basically went into apartments and started building apartments with rooftop pools and things like that. And then I had another set of disillusionment because what I realized was the people that were living in my apartments were not middle class at all. They were upper middle class. They were, yuppies that basically were, young guys that were in technology, and then they were like, yeah, $2,000 a month, $2,200 a month in rent is no big deal because I'm earning over $100,000. And I realized, but this isn't what I set out to do.
Right.
Where's the American middle class? So with the help of data, these days ChatGPT, but before just looking at data, I realized that except for the coastal markets, right? Except for the coastal markets, most of America lives in this $60,000 to $85,000 tier.
Yes.
If they're not living in Class C apartments, which is below that, right? So let's call it 40 to 60,000 is Class C, Class B apartments, and some Class A apartments. And from 60 to 85, before COVID, were people either renting single-family homes, or they actually had purchased their starter single-family homes, right? And anybody above 85 had a lot of choices; they could decide what to do, right? So that's 60 to 85. Since COVID started, 100% of them, 18 million families, have lost that choice. Their only choice now is to rent.
Yeah.
So because no one, practically no one in any part of the United States can qualify for a single family home with an $85,000 income.
Yes,
right?
because it's
maybe
national.
Maybe in Detroit, right?
Yeah.
But the rest of the U.S., you know, we've crossed way past the $300,000 mark, right? And in terms of, you know, median household prices, interest rates have doubled, insurance is expensive, property taxes are expensive.
Yeah, even the secondary and tertiary markets.
Exactly, even the tertiary markets are looking at $90,000 in income. So what happens to these people that have either one, you know, good job, 60 to 85K, or two decent jobs that add up to that same number, and probably have a kid and a dog? Well, they are forever renters. So since COVID, in only 4.5 years, we have turned 18 million Americans into forever renters. Their chances of ever getting towards homeownership are less than 1%, statistically speaking. So some of them will get raises and get there, but that's the 1%.
Right, yeah.
The remaining 99%, they're renters forever. And so I started thinking about, in 2021, about what is the best way to serve them. So I did some polls in my apartments, and these are Class A apartments, so they're very nice looking. And we put in a bunch of questions, but we had a question in there that was the secret question. That was all we cared about, right? The rest of the questions were there just to sort of, you know, hide this one. And the question was really simple. Is this your home? 4 words. Is this your home? Right?
As in, are you ongoing renters?
Exactly.
Period.
Like this. Do you think of this? And everyone has a different interpretation of of those words. But I wanted there to be different interpretations. So we asked that question this way: is this your home? Right? And very small percentage of people said yes. Right?
Okay.
And to them, even though they liked living there, or they may be okay living there, in their mind, this was never their home. This was basically they're on their way to some destination.
Right.
Not realizing that they're never going to get to that destination because they're not sitting with data the way I am. Every single year, the gap between where they need to go and where they are actually widens. They're getting further and further away from their destination. They don't know that, right? They're completely unaware.
Yeah.
But they still think that that's their destination. Now, I then went back and did the same survey in my townhome rental properties.
Okay, thank you. Because I was about to say, you're self-selecting your A class, so you're selecting people who believe they have forward possibilities. Because they're going to drive them.
Exactly.
But you're
the
not
Bs
talking
really
about them.
don't
You're
have
talking about the 60 to 85.
Right.
Those are chronic workers.
Exactly. So what I did was I had some communities where the average rents were about $1,700. You multiply that by 12, that's 20 grand. And so that means if you have $60,000 in income, you qualify.
You qualify.
Right?
Yep.
And so I had a large community didn't have my infinity pools, didn't have my rooftop lounges, you know, no pools at all actually, no gyms, no clubhouses. It was just a bunch of townhomes with a nice park.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
And I asked them that question.
Okay.
Well, you'd be shocked. The difference was that about 10% of the people in my apartment said yes. About 60% of the people in those townhomes said yes. So I hired somebody who was actually sitting 50 feet away, and he's playing with his phone right there. That's him. I hired him. And we went out there and did interviews with that audience.
Okay.
And we asked them this question: why aren't you in an apartment?
Right.
Right? And those are all on my website. He was the cameraman. And what I realized is the more we talked with these people, the more they realized that this group had actually reached the conclusion that they were not going to get to homeownership, and to them, rental townhomes were the next best thing. And they gave me the answers.
They were going to be able to
their
afford.
answers were, I have a little backyard, I have 1-car garage, and my motorcycle is parked there, or my RV is parked there. You know, this is Idaho, so they had lots of fun stuff parked there. They said things like, I don't have people running up and down the hallways. I don't have people making noise at midnight, you know, doop, 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 above me, over my head. I don't have, you know, pit bulls and Rottweilers to deal with. I don't have the smell of marijuana.
Yeah.
This is what I heard from people.
Yeah, I understand. I've owned apartment buildings. I know all those things.
And what was the other thing that was interesting was we couldn't really get the people living in our Class A, Class B apartments to form communities. Like some people would form community. Others were just in their apartments because they really didn't think they were going to be there for a long time.
This isn't their home. They're not building a
but
community
the townhome people,
they do.
They were basically they were treating it like their home, so they were treating their neighbors like their friends, and they were having barbecues and stuff like that. We were helping with that process in the first year, but then we didn't have to.
Okay.
As a result, something phenomenal was happening. My townhome communities were producing massive amounts of profit because there was no turnover. So
Yes.
turnover is the
Yep.
biggest single reason why we lose money in apartments, right?
Yes,
It's our biggest
it
single
is.
cost
Yep.
because you lose, essentially at least a month of rent and so much, maintenance overhead.
Yeah, generally 2 to 3 months worth of
Yeah,
money goes into the make ready
2
and
to
the
3
vacancy
months.
factor.
That's perfect number, right? What if your tenants were renewing 80% of the time, right? Where
Instead of
apartments are about
55.
50%, 55%, right? 80%, the mathematics is huge. The difference between those two areas is absolutely gigantic. Most people don't understand how much of that, almost all of it falls directly to not net operating income, right? So I looked at that and said, over a 5-year model, this is actually better than my Class A apartments.
Okay.
And I have thousands of units of Class A, so not bashing it. I think that needs to continue. We need to continue building Class A. Just for me personally, I had found a better way. I'd found a way that actually was more profitable, less risky. And I'll tell you why building townhomes is less risky than apartments. Townhomes are single families with a shared wall, right? They're basically just single family. And so the codes are much easier. You need a lot more steel and a lot more concrete in an apartment complex. And most of the time you have to build the whole damn thing before you can put a single tenant in it. With townhomes, we just
Yes,
basically
phases.
have buildings of 4 townhomes or 6 townhomes. So as soon as that building's ready and the road in front of it is ready, people can live there. This means that you can actually phase construction. And that's a very, very, it's not a profitable thing to do, but it massively reduces risk. It hugely reduces risk because you get to income very, very fast. As quickly as 8 months after starting construction, you have people living there, where for an apartment, it's more like 21 months or 22 months. And so I loved the math, and the math was very exciting to me.
Okay.
I loved the end result for the tenants,
Right.
and that was even more exciting.
Because purpose was where we started this
The
conversation.
profit and the purpose came together.
Yes.
And so I went to my investors. I actually opened a new company, got them to invest in the company. I'm not talking about investing in projects. They invested in the company. And then I went out and got institutional money, $100 million checks. Because the moment they saw this and understood it, they said, this is the best that we can achieve, right? And some of these institutional guys were previously investing into single-family homes, and they weren't liking the outcomes.
Right.
Because it's so expensive to build single-family homes. A townhome is much cheaper to build. You're sharing walls. It's smaller. Doesn't have 2 car garages. Has a small backyard and shared, space. But you're not building the fancy clubhouses. So I like to tell people, when they're like, so you don't build, you don't have pools or gyms, why don't you do that? And I say, what you fundamentally don't understand is the townhome is the amenity, and the amenity is the townhome.
Okay.
And the tenants that live there fully understand that. I don't have to sell them on anything.
Okay.
Right? That's what they care about. That's why they come to my townhomes. And so I think that segment of American construction is going to be huge. Last year we built about 600,000 apartments. Normally we build about 400,000. I think about 15% of that is going to be townhome construction.
Okay.
And that's what I want to specialize in, because the end result is absolutely marvelous.
Well, so it just, for me, given your length of description, I now get a chance to understand the brilliance of it. Because when you talk about the mortgage has gone up and there's a bigger and bigger gap, we're going to have a larger and larger renter nation, and that probably is going to be permanent. Secondary and tertiary cities are no longer going to be a place where they can go to and then do the long drive to work, because that is now outside of their price point as well. You definitely, I know the quality of life versus an apartment building versus a townhome is distinctly different for the renter, but it also gives them a smaller footprint for them to be able to buy in and afford. And I definitely have found more consistency, longer term tenancy inside of the townhome. Again, like you said, the amenity is the townhome, which is I don't have somebody over my head, and I feel like I have my own walls, and I have access to my own backyard, even a little space of grass and grass and garage. I can see how that truly now starts to serve, especially as this nation, I think, continues to bifurcate further and further.
Unfortunately,
And that is the reality of it financially. We've seen it in the quintiles for a long time. And so I can see how that actually is going to truly serve that population in a way where they're happy. They have long-term tenancy. They're capable. And when you sell these townhomes, or are you renting the townhomes?
We sell the entire community to investors.
The entire community to investors.
And,
okay.
and so
then
we know that the
townhomes,
investors are going to
and
jack
they stay
up.
Renters.
You know, they're going to jack up the rents after they buy it from us. So here's how we fix that problem, right? There's 323 metros in the United States, right? You can look them all up on Wikipedia. We were only able to find 14 where the math works profitably, because from the very beginning, what we said is, how do we make this work? Like most markets that we were in, the math was not working. It was just almost as bad as single-family homes, right, from a profitability perspective. So what we did is, we said, what are the biggest factors that affect profitability, right? And so here are the ones that we came up with. We call them the 800-pound gorillas, not gorillas.
Okay.
We only build in markets that have growth,
Okay.
but are not growth leading. So they're not like the fastest growing markets in the US. They're sort of in the top 25%, right? But they have to have low cost of construction, low cost of land, low property taxes, and low insurance. So they have to have these 4 things happening together. And out of 323 markets in the US, we've only found 14
that fit
right?
that
And so and it was sad because some of my favorite markets, the markets that I loved the most, were not anywhere near the list. So I basically said, yeah, but this is a mission. In a mission, you just focused on the fact that, you know, you want to build as many of these as possible, then you've got to go to the markets where the math works. So let me give you an extreme example, right? So in San Antonio, property taxes are about 2.5%, right, for the year. In Idaho Falls, property taxes are 0.8%. So for the same renter with the same net operating income, right, well, same rent, you're producing a lot more NOI because you're just paying a lot less in property taxes. Same thing for Houston insurance versus Idaho Falls insurance. And Idaho Falls is just not the greatest market in the world, but it's a perfect example of a market that simultaneously has low property taxes, low insurance, low land cost and low construction cost, but at the same time, it is a very fast-growing market. So its population growth, job growth is phenomenal. So we're looking for just those markets, and that means that unfortunately, I'm not able to build in the sexy markets. I am not able to build in Austin, Dallas, Nashville, Orlando, Atlanta. None of those markets work for me. So I'm working, you know, I have one institutional market that works, and that's Raleigh. Right? And there I have to go like 15 miles outside the city. Right? Yep. But the rest of them are Indianapolis, Kansas City, Reno, Northwest Arkansas. Those are sort of the markets where I'm making things work. And I just tell myself it's profitable and I can hit my goal of 10,000 rental townhomes.
Beautiful. I think it's a perfect description. I wish there were more markets, and it does make me think about in 10 years, in 15 years, what are we going to see? Because the need for housing will continue to be short. We can continue to not have enough rental units, having to do with cost of construction, difficulty of development, being able to find land that is cheap enough to be able to
It's harder to build now with tariffs, right? So my construction costs, we've changed our models to add 8% in construction costs for 2025. I hope that Trump doesn't stay with the tariffs. But right now, all of my models, we've basically increased our construction cost by 8%, which has dropped our profits.
And if he is doing the deportation the way he wants to, a lot of those workers work in construction, and they work in that areas as far as agriculture.
Cost inflation there as well.
So I think the development's actually going to become more difficult for the short run, at least. I can't see for sure how his deregulation, maybe it will bring down the cost of housing, the deregulation he wants to do in that space of real estate. I haven't seen anything yet.
I think he's got some good ideas there, but it takes a long time to deregulate for real estate. I think that in general, the deregulation that he's talking about, there are many other areas that he's going to benefit. Real estate deregulation is not a short-term thing.
Yeah, and I don't think it's on his immediate agenda either.
No, I haven't seen him talk about it.
Yeah, he's really been talking about other things.
Oil
although
and
it is
gas
one of the things he's
is a
talked
big
about.
thing, and I'm, again, not a huge fan of Trump, but I think that we definitely need energy independence in the U.S. We've got too many enemies. So it's dangerous to live in a world where we don't have energy independence, and we just got it 2 years ago.
We're
not giving it up.
That's right. That's right. And it does. It takes a while to get there. Thank you, Neal Bawa, the mad scientist of real estate. I am so excited to be able to both support you in your project of your 10,000 homes, which I think is passion meets purpose, which I support 1,000,000%, because I believe investing in real estate is about being able to follow your passion and using real estate as the tool to get there. This is Christina Suter with Real Estate Breakthrough, sitting at the best ever conference, ninth best ever conference, and I truly can recommend it. And Neal, you are brilliant. We so appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on the show.
All right, guys.